What's up, gang? It's Kevin here, Life22. Um, well, I forgot to turn that back up. My intro is a bit loud in my ear. Yeah, Kevin here, Life22. News over beers. So, found one. Got a warm Bush Light that was not in the fridge, but I had a couple too many drinks yesterday, so taking it a little easy. Got a pile of waters waiting here to be drank it down. So today, a little different than the other few days that we've done some of these news over beers is we've got we're doing we had last one we did was the Common Council meeting on 8/24. This one is the Diversity Inclusion Committee on 8/25. The following day, I have notes on that one. I'm almost done with the following one, which is the following council committee meetings, and I don't know if we'll have time to bang that out tonight, but that might be a tomorrow thing. And otherwise, we'll start with this one at least. Yeah. So this one's a new one. Obviously, we haven't done. It's not the newest. There's this one and there's another one. So we have 9/7 and then I believe 9/8 for the diversity inclusion. But it's just new for the channel. We haven't reviewed one of these mayoral committees that are posted online. But it's probably very handy that we do. Just a little backstory. One of the previous ones, after I made a post on the internet that were my views and my opinion, people blow up about that because if you don't agree with the flock, and you try to be your own shepherd, they have a tendency to try to cancel you, right? The cancel mob. They went to the city. They tried to get me fired for posting my. They went to my employer, tried to get me fired for posting my opinions on the internet, and essentially they called me out. I wasn't a public official. I hadn't even announced that I was running for the school board at the time, and they were like, "Your employee, Kevin Doherty, blah 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 blah." And they literally called me out in a meeting, and I was kind of fuming. And then they mentioned my kid, and just the whole thing, and I had to like calm down, and they didn't blow up on that meeting. But this is a good opportunity if they try to pull crap like this again. At least I can sit here and defend myself, and I'm happy to do so. And plus, that also paved the way. They talk about the social media policy, but more so, they talk about a social media policy for city employees in the next one. And I believe I was the forerunner of it because this committee brought it forward because how egregious Kevin Doherty is, because he posts his own opinions and he's not allowed to disagree with the populace and blah 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 blah, because this isn't America. This is Soviet China, Soviet Russia, and blah 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 blah. And the Fuhrer and the party. You must never disagree with the party. So that was the whole crux behind it. But they can go kick bricks because essentially lawyers for all parties involved pretty much said Kevin Doherty can do what he wants because he's just stating his opinion. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But essentially, I paved the way for people to continue to have the right to free speech, regardless if they are an employee of a company, an employee of a municipality. Listen, it's my freedom of speech is most represented by sharing my concern, critique, criticism of the government, whether that's my local municipality, the state government, the federal government. So that's, and just because they also happen to be my employer does not mean that that does not take away just shed my rights to critique the government using my First Amendment freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Whoever thinks that can be curtailed can stuff it. So, let us begin. My video.
Just got back from vacation. He may or may not be coming on. Do you want to wait a couple more minutes?
I'll wait a few minutes. I'll just wait like 5 more minutes before I leave.
So they're starting it. So a minute and 45 in is roughly when. So they start talking.
Viewing the candidate's resume, it looks
so
like
they're concerned about the HR position that at the time that they were trying to hire for the city, because we need an HR director, because we need someone to handle the sexual harassment aspect of the city, workplace violence, employee files, They have like a payroll clerk that handles it now, and like the auditor is like the sexual harassment, I call him coordinator. Um, you know, just because it's not up to times doesn't mean that the city isn't. I mean, sure, would it be handy? Yeah. Would things run a little smoother? Yeah. Or all of a sudden, if people are going to start climbing out of the woodwork because sexual harassment is running rampant throughout the city and workplace violence and employees are going home with black eyes? No, no. Um, Everybody's assumption, because of like the news and the media, is that every place that somebody goes to work, if somebody looks at you sideways, it must be because they have secretly raped you with their mind. Some like Jedi mind trick. You just got raped because somebody looked at you sideways. Like workplace violence, sexual harassment, that stuff is not as common. Like you're more likely to have your kid get sick and die from COVID. No, maybe not. That's such a small, I mean, that's tiniest of percentages. But it's still like, it's not, it's, you know what I mean? Like, oh, my boss asked me out to dinner. Can I have him arrested and lose his job for rape? Like, no, that shouldn't happen. Oh, no, but he's not allowed to ask you out for a business dinner, right? Like, you know, it is what it is. So anyways, they're talking about that and
experience in human resource management in a manager's position.
So here's John,
perhaps maybe a retiree who's just looking for something to do. So I think it is worth our time to sit down with the individual. But I have not heard anything from Bill, so we really should ask him.
Okay.
The mayor's
That's
not here.
basically where he left it with me also.
He's on vacation.
Moving
I
on.
think he was on
There's
vacation.
been no discussion on bumping that position up.
Oh, they want
Bill
to.
had mentioned it, but we really haven't discussed.
So they want to bump it up from a part-time to a full-time, right? I believe the candidate is a retiree HR director who was being brought in, and he's looking for a part-time gig. So if you make it a full-time gig, then you're going to have to probably see if the new guy wants to do that. Otherwise, you have to can him and replace him with a new person who can, you know, wants to handle the workload. You know what I mean? You don't retire to go to work full-time. But so, and since this meeting, they actually, it was this meeting, and then the next one, they were really gung-ho about what the hell's going on, blah, 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 blah. Then they finally got around to, like, the next day to interview the guy, and he started, like, last week. So this is, like, 3 weeks ago or whatever. So 4 weeks ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago. So this is, I mean, they've caught up. So, but sometimes greasy wheels get the grease, and this group here is kind of showing that. But we're gonna so they want to make it a part-time position. They want to make it a full-time position, and here
That's changing it to a full-time.
listen to what Linda
No.
has to say.
That discussion would come about during our budget discussions, which will be more in the springtime. So what has been budgeted for this year is a part-time position. And so if that is the case, then I think, you know, we'd have to put that in. That's usually around February or March.
Yeah, so this is a cop-out. Not trying to put Johnny on the spot here, and Linda will do similar stuff. They just kind of say, "Wow, we've only budgeted a part-time position, blah blah blah. The budget's already passed. There's nothing. Our hands are tied." If this is something you really want, like we've implemented policies in the middle of a budgetary year. We just find the funding. We cut one project. We can, because the council, after a budget's passed, can shift money with a resolution. You could say, I want to take all of the money out of this line item, right? Whether, you know, you could just say, I want to take all of the money out of, you know, even if it's a 100 line item, which typically is an employee, the employee line items, right? Like the 100s, that's like, you know, like water, sewer, fire, police, general workers, things like that. So you can just say, we're going to completely remove all the 100 line items of the streets department and put it into the fire department or the police department. And you can shift that money over there, right? But you have contract obligations, so like the money would sit there and then just roll into the general fund at the end of every year. I really need to do like an entire breakdown on how the budgetary process works. It's quite convoluted and kind of complicated, but once you get your hands on it and your mind on it, that's why I always recommend people to buck up and volunteer to be and run for office and be an alderman, so you can learn how your city works. and then you can help educate others. And that's part of what this this channel does. I mean, I'd like to keep my viewers educated. We try to do the self-help by the first of every month. We do the the different life theming stuff. And so, but here we go. We take into, so if you really want, like, we need a new snowplow right now. Well, they can take out a contingency. They can split, usually they do a third, a third, a third. If that snowplow is also the work truck is used to, plow around the sewer plant, the water plant, and also is used by like the parks or the streets department, they will take 1/3 because they have separate accounts, right? Like the water and sewer have to be separate than the tax base. So revenue generated by water goes to the water fund, sewer goes to the sewer fund, and the tax base funds the general fund. So what they'll do is they'll distribute the cost of that truck. Let's say it's a $60,000 truck. They'll take $20,000 from each account and pay for that truck. Okay, and they do little like okay, can we pull out of water, sewer, and general fund contingency, or from the fund balance, which is just the general fund that is unallocated savings essentially from each one of those accounts, which you want to have 15 to 25% amount in those accounts. And those aren't really like bank accounts where money is just sitting waiting to be spent. It's actually like your net somewhat liquid assets. But it's not like a bank account that's there all year round. It's like based on anticipation and stuff. It's really complicated. But if you really needed that truck, you would pull out a contingency. You would make something happen. Ooh, looks like somebody's typing. Yay. It's really cool. Anyways, so if you really needed that truck, you would take the money and you would take the funds and you would put it into that account. And then, shift it to that line item for truck purchases and authorize them, or you'd authorize the transfer of funds from contingency to the truck purchasing line item, right? Like our vehicle replacement fund. At which point, then with the verbal confirmation from the mayors to execute the orders of the common council, which is to go buy the truck, right? So the council moves and shifts money. You don't just have to wait through a budget. Like if you just said, hey, we want to defund the police, which I'm not in favor of at all, but if you were to say, if that was your goal and you're trying to accomplish that, you can take the contingency, you can take all the 100 line item from that specific department's payroll and shift it elsewhere. Well, now they can't cut paychecks because there's zero money in that account. Like they don't have the authorization to spend money to go negative into an account balance. And I don't think you could do that. It'd be very difficult to pull off, but that is a legitimate, like, that the council has that authority to move money wherever it would like to. It can completely just, if we didn't vote on a budget, this has always been my Hail Mary play. If you don't vote on a budget, essentially you would go into emergency mode. You would shut down everything but like bare minimum staffing on police, fire, and you would have like skeleton crew at the city building. You would not have there would be no street crews or anything like that if the budget did not pass. And that's why it's a battle between, like, the mayor has to present the budget to the common council, and the common council has to approve, or they can either vote up or down the budget. They can make recommendations, but the mayor doesn't have to listen. So that's where it gets into this, like, well, you passed the budget, well, you didn't, you presented doo-doo to us, you know what I mean? And we weren't going to go into emergency mode. Nobody ever wants to be the person that sends it into emergency. Well, there was one alderman that was always like, I'll take it there, let's go. And you have these years. Some years it's real easy. Some years, like, everybody's emotions are high, and like I'd like to see this with the funding. You want to see that with the funding. You start butting heads. It becomes a real like dominance game. And some of those times it shows forthwith. But you plug on through. So that's a little bit. So this is like a cop-out. Like if they were truly passionate about a full-time HR director, which I think if you're getting an HR director, you start out with the part-time guy, let him figure it out, let him work through some of the issues, and it might take a while to get some of it done, but some of it will be pretty easy. Some of it's like policy writing. You can write 20, especially if the guy's got all this experience, he really could be able to just like, oh, here's the database of all the, from my previous employment, I had all these, or there's a great website I use as a database for policies for New York State, or whatever, this covers this federal mandate and all. The guy obviously is in that field. he could probably bang out and replace and submit to the mayor 20 new policies or policy changes like a day if he really got into it. You know what I mean? So in 6 months' time, this will have corrected itself. It's, hey, the ball got started, right? But I don't think there's a reason to like crap can this guy and then like wait for somebody who's looking for a full-time position. I think you work your way into that. You know, you hire a second part-time, or you see if this guy really, you know, maybe he just bangs it out and they're like, oh, good thing we didn't hire a full-time person. Full-time person equals extra benefits. It's you're not just like going from 50% to 100%. You're going from like 50% of what you're going from like, we're budgeting. I don't know what the part-time position would be. Maybe an HR director would be like maybe $75,000 a year. So you're budgeting like 37,500. But now you don't have to pay this guy benefits, right? Like, okay, great. But now all of a sudden we bump him up to 100%. The guy doesn't, you get 100 full. Now it's 75,000 for the salary or for his pay, and then you've got to add in, like the health benefits, the retirement contributions, all that stuff, and you're actually paying the guy like 100,000. So you just went from you increased it not by 50%, not doubled it. You like doubled it plus 15%. So, just throwing that out there. But this is just, if you don't think it's necessary, you can just, we'll wait till budget season happens, and then there's a bunch of other things that come up in budget season, so confusing anyways, that if you don't remember these conversations, your HR director falls by the wayside.
All right, I just know that we talked about it here.
We talked about it here, right.
Whatever the process is, it is.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, moving on. Surveys. Remember that the deadline is August 31st, so we can start looking them over September 1st. I know I gave some more to Michiko, and she was going.
So they got a bunch of surveys from people that they like cherry picked. Like they went to certain people's houses, they went to like the farmer's market, and they handed out surveys. And they did a Survey Monkey thing. I don't like the online surveys because essentially you're going to get like the polls that you would get from Facebook. It doesn't represent like the silent majority, right? And a lot of people nowadays don't like that term, but that's true, right? Like everybody in America hates Trump. Well, guess what? Trump got, it was like it wasn't like everyone was like, oh, all the polls out there said Trump was going to lose by, great margins, and he didn't lose by that much. And it was one of those, like, it was almost a 50-50 split. And it was one of those, like, made it look like he was gonna take 15% of the vote, and Biden was gonna get 85% of the vote, and like that's how the polls were. And then like the next day, everyone was like, "Wow, those polls were off. How could you be this far off as your spread? Like if you were a bookie, you'd probably be wearing cement shoes and sitting at the bottom of the Potomac." But that is what it is. I think these surveys, especially when you go out to these ones, it's skewed to one side. Like there's more leftists filling out surveys online to complete their agendas because there's no survey that helps you hold the status quo. So a lot of things are status quo, right? That people want to keep, but there's no like survey that's gonna hold it still. There's surveys that change, right? Like that's what surveys are looking for. They're looking for what people want changed. And then, so they talk about surveys and yada yada and what's going on. Oh, social media policy, 4 minutes in.
Send them off to Chris.
And they're going to send them to Chris, and Chris is going to evaluate them. And I still don't think they're done by the next meeting.
I have been talking with Tiffany about getting our social media changes on the agenda for the Common Council, so we can show them what changes we've made, and let them know that Jack, our city attorney, has already looked them over.
So, social media policy essentially was like 4 pages long. It was 4 pages long, and it had a pile of information in it, talking about disciplinary actions. It was, it's funny because once you see a couple laws that people write, PLs that they put forth, their writing style, and when you read it, you can hear. You ever read something somebody wrote and you've listened to something they wrote, the way they talk, the way their mind works with how they think the legal system works? You fall into like an archetype, but it's like a fingerprint. If I wrote something into the law, you could smell me on it, right? you could hear like it's a little chaotic, but it's legal, and you're like, man, someone's really pushing the buttons here. Someone's pushing the envelope. Someone's like taking out restrictions. Bah. You can tell that like somebody's in it, right? Like you can tell, like you can smell me on it. You're like, ah, Kevin Doherty wrote that, right? This 4-page document came from like New Brunswick or something like that. I can't remember the original place it came from, but then it was altered, and those alterations came from somebody local, and it smelled like the Alderman for Ward 6. It smelled like Alderman Robinson, and I thought that you know, his wife sits on this committee, and him and his wife were very outspoken about my Facebook and social media policies and everything else, and they were the first ones to call me out in this type of meeting. He didn't, but she did, and he called me out in other meetings. So there was just a lot of, you know, people, you know, name calling going on, and I've seen some of his legislation that came through, like the noise ordinance and stuff like that, and having to critique it and make it, you know, fit our thing. And he's a novice kind of at it. I mean, he hasn't been on the council that long, so what, a year now? Anyways, so it's one of those like year and a half. Anyways, so he doesn't have like 5 years, like, you know what I mean. And I already came into it with a little legalese already under my belt, so writing this wasn't too hard. We had a better city attorney than, not saying Jack's doing a horrible job, but he's part-time. Nick was there, I think, part-time, but he was there like all the time, and he would sit down and spend hours with you writing legislation. You could call him up and talk to him for 2 or 3 hours about legislation you're writing. There was just a lot more hands-on. I don't think that Jack's coming in. He's part-time, but he's part-time. Like, he's not the part-time and then like I volunteer extra, you know, like. So everybody's got a different style. Like Nick would work with people, and so I spent hours working with Nick, hundreds of hours writing different legislations over the last 5 years. So that was like an amazing opportunity that I had. So I feel like I could critique a little bit more and to make things work, right? But I can smell Vernon's modifications in here, and I'm like, man, he wrote this and then handed it to his wife and said, submit this to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for the social media policy. Well, there's 4 pages that get submitted, and then it goes to the labor attorneys, and it goes to the city attorney, and it goes to a bunch of other people, and they come back with these additions to it, and those additions are struck through. Like they add probably 1 paragraph worth of stuff, and then they strike out all but 1 paragraph worth of stuff. So essentially they took 4 pages, leaving all the strikeouts, right? And then they essentially added a paragraph. So they were essentially, if you were to delete everything they struck out and kept everything they wrote, you would actually have a document that is like a quarter to a half a page long. And so you've got like 4 1/4 to 4 1/8 of a page of information, just whittled down from 4 pages down to a quarter of a page, half a page at best, which is hilarious. And then it pretty much takes most of the teeth out of it, because you can't put the teeth that they want to put on this. They don't want anybody who works for the city, they want this to be like, no, you follow the regime, you follow our ideology, or you get fired, you lose your job. We want you and anybody related to you that lives in your household that supports you. We want you to just starve to death and drown in a gutter. And that's the mentality nowadays, and it's really disgusting and pathetic. But in this social media thing, after even I tested the waters, the city and my attorneys and everybody else had been informed that essentially you can't stop somebody from posting their thing, even with a social media policy. This is still America, and government employees actually have a better fight than non-government employees, because they're at will with their employer. Then also in this policy that they're proposing, if you add a disclaimer, essentially it helps your case to not be dragged in front of, you know, any kind of punitive kangaroo court. And so essentially I took from this proposed media policy, I took the disclaimer, and we've already spent probably 6 hours going through the hundreds of social media accounts that we have, either for businesses, multiple ones for Twitter, for the political, for the YouTube, for the just all the different types. Every business that has a page, every rental company that I have, every single one of anything that I'm tied to. If I'm a moderator on something, like, I have added this disclaimer into the description. And it states that, like, any posts are mine, are of personal nature and do not represent that of my employer, blah blah blah, and that's it. That's it. Ta-da, done. And I spent 6 hours of my time to do that, just to curb against people being jerk-offs and trying to take my job, which has nothing to do with this. Technically, I'm an employee of my company, and this doesn't make any money, but I'm still an employee of my company, and I am a podcaster. I provide news and information to the world using YouTube, and that essentially, like, if somebody worked for the local newspaper and were also part-time for the city or full-time for the city, like, somebody doesn't like the article they wrote at their other employer, you're going to fire them from their first employer? Like, nobody seems to get that. Like, I'm allowed to have as many jobs as I want. If one of my jobs is stating my opinions as a podcaster, well, guess what? Tough noogies. Like, oh, I'm sorry, sir, you can't be a cameraman for CNN and Fox News. Like, why not? Because we don't like each other. Like, no, sorry, that's a garbage argument. You can go take that and put it in your butt. So anyways, social media policy, and it gets good the next meeting where Linda presents it, and you can tell it's just like let's make the HR. We care wholeheartedly about making the HR director full time, because it just doesn't pan out. Then,
Along with our labor attorney, and hopefully she's hoping that sometime either the 1st or 3rd Tuesday in September,
yep,
they'll be on.
the 7th. She moves forward, and about the 45-minute
I said
mark.
earlier, I just want to check again, because John and Charlene came on. Did everybody receive the 2 documents that Michiko sent us? The harassment and workplace violence.
So here they review the workplace violence and workplace violence and sexual harassment, and then they turn around and they're just talking about these policies that the city has, and I don't know. It's just like, it's true nonsense. I think a lot of this stuff is. I think just like they're mandated from the state. The state gives you goddamn guidelines. Like, okay, so like, why they didn't update this policy? Like, we're following the state policy. Like, just because they don't have an updated policy doesn't mean that, like, and the sexual harassment isn't being created because this policy has like loopholes, like people going home like, I can't fight this rape that's going on. Like, no, that's not happening. So anyways,
and maybe you guys don't even know. I don't know. What training are they given to ensure that they know what a safe, healthy work environment is?
So this is the person in charge of coordinating it, and I believe the person is, or supervisors and people that are administering the sexual harassment and workplace violence types trainings, as well as, and they're just going on and on about where, who it gets filed with, and, I believe it's the auditor who is in charge of sexual harassment and complaints and workplace violence complaints and things like that. And it's like, okay, what kind of training do they get? I have notes here, like, I don't know, common sense. Like, well, technically, if you look sideways up to the right at somebody, that is an innate human, I'm gonna get you after work. I see you too, Parker. But no, like, it's common sense. Like, hey, Bill, we have a project we're working on, and Bill asked Judy to take her to work. These are all fictional people, by the way, hypothetical. So Bill asked Judy to work, to work late with her, and he had dinner ordered to the to the building while they worked on his presentation for whatever it is. And Judy says, I'm married, and Bill says, okay. because clearly it's a work. We're working. We're going to work until 9. We both agreed on that, and he brought dinner. Dinner always means like nowadays he held the door for me. God damn it! That's nonsense. That's nonsense. So like you can say, okay, I think Judy thinks there's something more. Bill's just trying to do his job, and he's trying to be a good pal at the workplace, and there's clearly a situation like that. But nowadays, like, that is instantaneously sexual harassment, and Bill's only motive in life was to take Judy to bed, and only insane people would get that from him holding the door and ordering pizza to the conference room, right? Like that's, but what kind of training do they get? Like, that's nonsense. Okay, so now they continue to talk about this. They talk about how the city's got tons of outdated stuff. Let's skim through. We're going to press.
Work with it.
And did about the 15-minute mark.
That's where like a full-time HR person might help out to do all those things. So like I know with the schools, we have like the DASA, and you can get on each school has their website. So it would go to the principal, like for like a bullying type thing. But then we have our HR person. So, I mean, I guess we would have to find out who the actual committee is or who the person goes to.
They've got a committee for like ethics or something, and like their policies are cross-referencing a bunch of stuff. There's stuff in the charter that says like an ethics committee, and then there's another one that says like the committee for diversity and discrimination, and there's another one that says like workplace violence committee. There's a bunch of committees that were created in like limbo, and like just I don't know. It's okay, so you delete them. Like literally, most policies that govern employees, for the most part, I don't believe any of them go to like most like the computer use program. Like that's the mayor's office doing the hiring, firing, and running the day-to-day business. Essentially, they're executive orders. They are allowing the mayor to run the day-to-day to achieve the goals of the Common Council, which is to run the city. Right? That is what an executive order does. That is how the city does it. They just don't call it executive orders. So the mayor puts out a memorandum or a policy, and it goes to all employees, aldermen, whoever it pertains to. No smoking in work vehicles. Like the Common Council didn't approve a policy that said no smoking in vehicles. Or they approved a couple that said no smoking on city property. And the problem is that the vehicle is city property. And some employees probably didn't like smoking in the vehicles. Like, hey, dude, I'm in here. Can you stop smoking? Or every time I come in this vehicle, it smells like your goddamn cigars. Like, knock it off. You know what I mean? And so like it's one of those things. Like the current mayor would make a determination and then say this is the new policy going forward, blah 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 blah. The Common Council didn't approve anything that has to do with COVID requirements either. Those are executive policies created by the mayor's office to run the day-to-day to help, I don't know, so that they don't get canceled. You know what I mean? There's no requirement that says they have to wear masks. You have to do this, you have to do that, and like only if vaccinated. It's just so they go along with the crowd because they don't want to be vilified by the public. Because guess what? If you're a mayor, if you're a Common Council member, you are up for re-election every 2 or 4 years, depending on which one of those positions you are. But that's how it works. It breaks down that way, and people just don't seem to get it. But like that's these policies, most of them can be approved by the mayor. We have a computer policy, and I'm pretty sure the council didn't vote on anything like that. It might be in the code. Maybe certain policies are, but there's a lot of them that are just interpretations, and it's how the mayor runs business. Workplace violence, sexual harassment, things like that. Mandated by the state. The mayor's got to run essentially the city. City's got employees. Employees have to follow these state mandates, unbeknownst to the Common Council. So the mayor puts forth a policy that coincides with how employees should act, and blah blah blah, and says that hey, you must complete your trainings within a reasonable manner and get them to this person, and setting out a guideline in order for you to complete the mandates by the state. It's pretty self-explanatory stuff, and the stuff is out of date. It's like, okay, big deal. Like everyone's still completing their stuff that meets the state mandates. So even though there's a piece of paper out there somewhere that just has the, whatever. Okay, so about 18 minutes in, they start they start hammering down on the mayor.
I don't, other,
It gets a little, doesn't get bloody, but I don't know, it's just,
Policy, and just ask him who is the committee and who are his 3 appointments.
they're hung up on it. And it's
Okay.
like, okay, well,
The
because-
other thing
questions are
about
gonna-
that, and I'll tell Bill this, because since he is the final decision maker, he's got no business in the room until the
Right.
very end. He's got no business with his hand in that cookie jar.
So they're talking
Yeah.
about if a complaint goes forward, the mayor, because he makes the final say so on an investigation as the top, right? And then there's like either a committee or it's, like the auditor or whoever, and the department head and the auditor and somebody else and the HR director, and they're the committee that reviews it, and then like they take the complaint and they move it forward, and you got all these people that are like, okay, well, what do you do about it? I guess I froze, but anyways, now I'm back. So anyways, no, it's just I don't know, it's one of those things you can look at it and you're like, okay, so it's the mayor's ship. We have a strong mayor, weak council type of government. And what has to happen is you have to turn around and you have to do a charter change to make a strong council, weak mayor form of government, which takes a lot because the mayor has to initiate a charter commission. I don't believe the council can do this, and we looked into it, and it was always estoppeled by the mayor because, and it happened in the past too. Like the mayor prior to Linda, was going to do it. He got in. I'm going to do a charter change, blah blah blah, and then what happens is the potential for re-election comes up. You realize how much power you have as just being one person, as an at-large committee or an at-large an at-large elected position, and a lot of mayors fall by the wayside and they kind of just drag their feet on starting the charter commission, or they start it and then they fumble it so that it makes it look like, and they pick a bunch of people that they know are on their side, and it happens, right? Like, and it takes forever to get a charter change to go through because they got to study it. It takes about 4 years. It takes your entire term to do it. So if you're going to go in and do it, you got to start it in your first year so that it doesn't stop with another mayor in case you don't get reelected. But this is how it works, right? So a pile of people on this committee do not like Bill, the current mayor, and so what happens is they're like, "Well, this is Bill's fault. Bill has no place in this. This is blah blah blah." Half these policies, half the way that this stuff has been going on since even prior to Linda Witt being mayor, and so it's like she didn't change these things either. Some of these policies, these things were there before then. Like, and how come she's not getting the criticism? And guess what? What happens when, like, Bill's not the mayor anymore and somebody on your side is doing it? Well, now you want him to have all that power now, don't you? It's the same thing. Like, people hated Donald Trump, but we can't have that guy have power, and then you give it to Joe Biden, and now all of a sudden all the people that wanted Trump go, I don't want that guy to have power either. And that's what happens. It's a power struggle. We don't get anything done. Well, that's because you finally changed the charter and now you made a weak mayor. And like, that's what happens. It's a strong mayor thing. So he's the king of the, and they say this a bunch of times. This is a king of the castle complex. Guess what? He's the king of the castle. That's what happens when you have a strong mayor form of government. People need to get over it. Like, you have a strong mayor form of government. Guess what? You have a king. You have a king. He is the king of the castle for 4 years. If he really screws up, he doesn't get reelected. It's not a dictatorship. He doesn't get to stay there. So it's not, and then the next person gets it, and a bunch of other people don't like the power that person has. You don't just, well, we need to change this whole thing up. Like, no, you're an advisory board. I think I talk about that here. No, I'm going to talk about that in the next meeting because I listened to it already. I just hadn't made notes so I can skim through for you guys to make these not last. You guys don't have to watch it the whole thing through. We can kind of skip through to the good stuff. And here, this is.
And the
part
other,
of it,
Exactly.
the other
and
comment
part
I
of it
want to
is-
make
go ahead.
is this withdrawal of discrimination or harassment complaint. What kind of foolishness is that? Because if somebody files a complaint and then they want to withdraw it, that tells me that there's a disciplinary or some kind of issue going on there, because you don't file these kind of complaints against people and then go, oops, sorry, didn't mean it.
Exactly.
That I've never seen that.
So she hasn't seen that in her life, and I get it, and I'm sure somebody was putting the brakes on for the whole sexual harassment thing, because I think a lot of these tools are put out there not because they're actually doing anything, but because they're actually used as like a way for minor employees to like kind of lure something over their bosses too, because I'm going to say like there's a lot more complaints being filed, and the person filing the complaint gets charged because the actual investigation reveals there's less people being sexually harassed than there are people faking it. And I mean, there's statistics out there that show this stuff. We reviewed them on the council when we were talking about some of these changes before I got off, and it's like you do your homework and then people brush you under the rug. That's not what the narrative says, though. And the narrative is not true, and it just got thrown in there, but we got to believe it because it's the narrative. Well, guess what? So, but I get it. Somebody was trying to put the brakes on to some like liberal policy that says, oh, sexual harassment is rampant, and what do they say? Like 25% of, sorry, Parker, I'm reading your message. Yeah, no, people do. People just, they want to show that they don't even know what they're doing. No, there's people that just want all the power. So this is an advisory committee. Their job is to advise on policy changes they think would better it. If they don't change, if it's taken under advisement, nothing comes of it, drop it, because you being a squeaky wheel is just going to get you thrown off this committee. Guess what? The American cherry pick who he puts on this committee, and he can pluck them cherries right back. He can just toss them out, put new cherries there in his bowl of cherries. And that's, I mean, you're an advisory committee. You have no power. You were asked to volunteer your time. Thank you for doing so. I think this committee is, I think the purpose of this committee was just to check a woke agenda box, and I don't think that it's actually necessary. Yeah, should we review policies here and there and update them? Yeah. Are there like employees going home like sobbing because they were physically raped at work, and it's just being swept under the rug? No. Are there some inefficiencies with government? Heck yeah. But update the policies. Whatever, like just update them, but all the mandates from the state, they're just ridiculous. I don't know. It's almost beyond me that it's. So, but I do agree with her. Like, should there be a retraction portion in the form? No. But could have been an out for all those people that just lie and make it up. One of my previous employers, I worked there, and there was an employee up in Buffalo at one of the branches up there that would go through, and she got 4 employees fired for sexual harassment. She was not like, she would talk about how she was a 10. She was not a 10. And and then you hear about the collusion stories from other employees, like, no, she colluded with this person to get this person fired. And she made her way up the chain by getting people fired, by working the system. It was almost like mini politics. It was horseshit. Good people losing their jobs, and it just, I don't know. They were good employees. They did their job. They made good sales. They did what they were supposed to do. So anyways, skipping
Career.
to talk about that.
But
And now let's talk about, I have a note here. It says state. Let's see, at 29 minutes in. Oh, we lost somebody.
But if you have something in place that the state has mandated using their language, then it might have a 50-50 chance of being a fair policy.
No, because the
There's a
state.
statement
Yeah,
that
because
some
it
supervisors-
definitely isn't. I mean, even there's a portion, I'm trying to find it. I just lost it. I was looking at it. But it said something to the effect of, if a department head came to a resolution, like why is the department head handling the complaint? It just, like you said, Charlene, very much so a grip on this. Let me,
Right, you need HR director, they handle
manipulate the
complaint. Okay, but we
narrative
didn't
and
have
control
one.
the situation. As
These
opposed
policies
to
were written before HR
addressing it
directors even
appropriately.
existed.
And I think a lot of our policies, actually, when you read through them, are kind of dictated like that, honestly.
Oh,
So-
that's true. That's our job to fix it. But it's
So I
true,
will-
if you
fixing
read
it.
through this, it's really geared towards city oversight and city
You like
control
Ellen Parker?
of
She was not a
where
10.
the complaint goes, who sees it, and what happens. And then to throw one more thing on the table is there's the whole union negotiated aspect of it. You can have a complaint, but if that person disagrees and they bring in their union rep and points the finger and says, you're discriminating against me, you have a whole new ball of wax going on.
Mhm.
And that's the downside, to
Well,
me.
worse than the union rep
Worse than a union rep. Catch this one. This one's a
pointing the
good one.
finger saying that you have a problem.
Point your
Mhm.
finger.
If you did something or lack of did something based on this policy as it currently exists, you might have a lawyer
Ooh, a
problem.
lawyer problem. Guess what?
Right.
The union comes with like 30 lawyers, and they are usually one of the biggest fears of the city. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to get in a union battle. No one wants to fight like with the union. That's like if like the city, like it's one of the easiest ones because the city is so closely related to its employees. They work and step on, in, over top, working, brushing right up against one another. That relationship is like this, right? Union employees, the city, right? It's intermingled and it's very complicated how it works and functions properly. So guess what? Like, usually the city's not suing the union. It's usually the union exists to sue the city. Well, if you have worse than a union problem, you got a lawyer problem. Like, the lawyers and the unions are the same. Like, that's the same. You got to get sued, which means you got lawyers involved. So and that's based on these hypotheticals of something's actually happening.
Right.
So
I don't
Once
know.
the
I don't
complaint-
like
Here it
the
comes.
whole king of the castle feel of
King
how
of
the
the castle.
policy's written.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think fixing this or updating it is long overdue.
Mhm.
And I think it's good to put it on the table and just kind of pull it apart and just really focus in on some of the things that are, one, very outdated. And if you look at it from a certain perspective, is very discriminatory in itself.
Mm-hmm.
how is this policy discriminatory in and of itself? Because it's outdated. It discriminates because it's an old policy. Are we being ageist now? That's okay. And then, I mean, there's a lot of
It
issues.
sets you up to not get far.
The verbal and nonverbal harassment piece, I think that we should go back and take a look at our social media policy for some words in there for the verbal and nonverbal piece. I think we came up with some good verbiage and some good wording when we went through that.
And they
Right.
cut it all out. They cut your
I'm gonna call
policy.
it a learning experience about the time.
They took the
frames that it
Achilles of your
takes to get
policy
something
and they
from
cut
point
its
A to
ankles.
point
They
B.
cut you off below the knees.
When we came up with that learning experience, I think if we could use some of the verbiage that came out of there in here, it might take less of a learning experience to get.
They keep saying this. So government's slow. Welcome to government. There's checks and balances. You're on an advisory committee that presents stuff to the Common Council. Technically, this committee is a mayoral committee, and it has to go to the mayor, and then the mayor then presents it to the Common Council. But because Linda is also on the Common Council, and so is John Crawford up until this meeting. Yes, I think it was the day before the next meeting that John Crawford resigned from the committee. He just had too much going on or something. So, which it's a taxing job being council president. So I'm not gonna hound John for that one. This advisory board is like a drop in the bucket. They make it seem like these guys are on a power trip. That's what it is. Like we're gonna anybody that disagrees with us, we got them. Ba 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 ba. We're firing them left and right. You don't have that authority. You're an advisory committee being placated because you're part of the woke mob and nobody wants to hear it. And you guys are all on a power trip. But then I think that there's better committees to be a part of that are doing better things for the city than making minor tweaks to sexual harassment policies on the off chance, the 1 in a million chance that it happens. The city hires Cuomo to come in and work for us, and then he goes around slapping fannies, killing grannies. That's the Cuomo slogan. I love it. So government's slow, all right? And then they talk about
The change.
So I
8 seconds.
understand that there's a new city attorney.
So they talk
Jack
about
Hart.
So he's new. I mean, what's he been in?
Yeah.
Like, okay, how old is he? I'm discriminating.
No, he actually is semi-retired.
Isn't he only
is-
part-
if you say
part-time?
you're discriminating with,
He's part-time, but he
confidence,
also,
then it's not discriminating.
several
It's
years
okay.
ago, he was a city attorney. So it's not his first time doing the job. But yeah, he's our city attorney at present because Nick DeSerbo went on to become the city judge.
hell yeah.
But definitely the as far as timeline of getting this stuff
So let's
established
scroll
and
forward
put in
here.
place part-time.
Yeah, part-time city employee, city attorney is not
And
beneficial for
respect
getting
is
stuff
dealt to the person filing the complaint.
Well, with all due respect, that's how we got in the situation that we're in. It's because we had these positions and they were eliminated, and then the mayor decided that it was okay for the mayor's role just to take on these additional responsibilities, and now we all sit here because it ain't right.
every time a mayor has to go through any appointed from almost all appointed positions that aren't like CSCA or civil servicely protected. The mayor will go through and appoint somebody, and then they, after so long, they get civil service protection for certain ones. Other ones, like the Common Council secretary, is actually appointed by the city attorney to sit with. It's appointed by the mayor or the city attorney. So essentially, the city attorney gets a secretary, and it also or a cleric, and it also happens to be the Common Council's administrative clerk. So whenever the council and every mayor, so essentially, like the mayor comes in, like let's say this mayor leaves and a new mayor comes in. Essentially, you have to be, your position as an appointed like city attorney has to be reappointed by that mayor, or you're out the door and he appoints somebody or she appoints somebody new. That's how that happens. So every appointment. So there's a lot of these stupid little committees that are buried in policy that were just drafted up in an email, signed and published by a previous mayor, and then all of a sudden that's it. Like, that's just how it ends. Sorry. So like, so these nobody understands that these things exist, and nobody understands that these things exist, and then what happens is you turn around. Oh, there it is. Sorry, gang, alt end. There it is, coming back. So nobody understands or realizes that these positions existed, and because there were nobody there to reappoint them, they fall by the wayside. They fall away. And okay, so sorry, so sad, too bad. You're not there anymore, and it doesn't get reappointed just because somebody forgot it existed, or somebody on the committee died, and it's hardly ever used. It's hardly ever used because sexual harassment is not happening here. Sexual harassment happens in all these places where they think that there's no lawlessness, but all the leftist laws they're passing creates more lawlessness, and then there's sexual harassment going on in like California. It runs rampant. Governor Cuomo's office, it runs rampant. The city is pretty right-leaning. And so you typically have less sexual harassment, less workplace violence. It happens in Buffalo. Yeah, it doesn't happen around here. Right. Thanks, Parker. But yeah, no, it's not happening here. And so these positions didn't exist because they're on some stupid memo that no one ever read, because when it needed to happen, there was a workplace violence thing. The mayor would quickly appoint 3 people to handle it, and then it'd be done. And then it gets taken care of. 38 minutes. Play.
Mhm.
Slide
So
in.
that's how the
That's how it.
Weeks, has it not?
Yeah, at
Okay,
least
so
a few weeks.
It's been a few weeks. We only
they
have
bitch about the
one
interview.
candidate. So my
Here's the
question
interview
then
bitch.
becomes, how important is this to the city? Because we can schedule ribbon cuttings, but we can't schedule an interview with one potential candidate.
Because we got a lot of shit going on. We got nobody being sexually harassed, but we have water
There's
mains
a problem there.
and
And I don't have
infrastructure
a problem
problems.
telling
We've
anybody
got
this.
snow schedules,
But there is an
or
extreme issue
streets to
with the
patch
fact that we're putting in the
before
work,
winter
we're putting
when
in
the season's
to
running
do
out. We're
things that are to
running out
protect the
of time,
people of
guys. The
Olean,
asphalt
the
plant's gonna
employees of
close here
Olean,
shortly.
the
We
city
gotta
of
finish our
Olean.
streets. We got
And it's
capital
not
projects
important
we're
from
working
the
on.
top down. That's a huge problem. And it shows, in my opinion, the importance that this committee holds from the top down. And that's frustrating. That's extremely frustrating.
No,
In
Gary,
my opinion, there's no reason at least the interview couldn't have already happened.
Exactly.
too-
And case in point, that's exactly this situation, filling that job, interviewing one person is case in point. That's why we got here.
It's
And
not
then-
like we have 10 candidates vying for the position. We have one who, just from looking at a piece of paper, we were told looks highly qualified for the position. What's the problem? The problem is the level of priority and the
I
importance.
got notes.
It isn't viewed as important.
And
But
the
yet-
other thing too is that, like, by not interviewing and putting people off, people have a disinterest and don't want to be,
Exactly.
That's what this meant.
like, especially even with young kids. Like, why? A good example is our son. He worked at Cutco. They said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna hire." He was kind of holding out because they kept saying, "No, we want you. Don't leave. Don't move yet." And then he up and moved because he can't wait for them to decide. You know,
So I don't think. Okay, so that might be slightly true with this position. The person's, is coming out of retirement to take a part-time job, right? Like, pretty sure they're just looking to pass some time. Like, they're not going to be like, you know what? I was sitting home and you didn't call me after 3 weeks, and guess what, guys? I decided that I want to. I really like gardening, and I probably like gardening more than I like a part-time job, so I'm gonna just pass. Like, okay, then we reapply we resend out the thing, but like, tough noogies. You guys can't be little crybabies about it. And then secondly, like, I don't think anybody at Cutco of importance, like somebody, like one of the people actually doing the hiring and firing, is telling candidates to, like, hang on, we'll hire you soon. I bet it was like a friend of a friend who worked there and was like, yeah, man, there might be a position open for you. You know, a 118-year-old to another 18-year-old. And the 118-year-old's got the job because maybe his dad works there in marketing or in sales or whatever, and got him a part-time position, and it turned into a full-time position. Now all of a sudden, the kid's 18, 19, 20, 21, they're getting out of college, and they're like, hey man, I'll get you a job, and blah blah blah. Something will open up soon, don't worry. And like, that kid doesn't have the pull. That's probably the person that's telling you, not the HR director, not the hiring guy, not the person that's doing the hiring and firing, is not telling your kid to hang on. So your kid did the right thing, move away and stop listening to his friends, because the position probably didn't open for another 3 years. You don't want your kids living in your basement for 3 more years. Like, that's how it goes. So we're at the, okay, good. We're
when they're gonna like hire him, and I feel like we're doing the same thing with the city. And as a taxpayer, like, and as a person on this committee, when we busted our butts to do all of this work to try to get all this stuff in, it's like it just goes and it sits.
I feel like we're viewed as a threat. It very much so is a king of the castle complex.
Epiphany moment. You got it, boys and girls. Yeah, I don't see why anybody doesn't view you as a threat. You're coming in, you're slicing and dicing over nonsense. You're cutting open the city and saying there's all these problems here. Oh, yeah, there's a policy right here. There's not a policy here. If somebody voted for Trump, they should be fired. Like, that's how it is. If you don't see things the way they want to be seen, you don't belong here. And that's how they're writing these policies. You were put on, this committee got created because you're being placated. A bunch of politicians didn't want to get like overhauled by a woke movement that told us to defund the police. And they said, well, their first step would be to start a diversity and inclusion committee. So guess what? They started a diversity and inclusion committee. Because diversity and inclusion committees across the country are about indoctrination into a falsehood than they are about actually being diverse. By saying that we have to be 100% represented by marginalized people, the marginalized community, right? Like, well, they're only 10% of the population, and they're not being heard. Well, you don't give them a 75% vote. They only represent 10% of the population. They should have equal representation. If they're 10% of the population, they should be like a 10% makeup. If you can find anybody who wants to run, right? Like, that's the problem. Like, you got 7 aldermen. If you had 10 aldermen, and there was one group of people that represented 10% of the population, you've got one alderman spot you can slightly expect to be filled by that position. But guess what? Now you got to find one person, 10%. Let's say Olean has 10,000 people, right? We're close, right? We're 14 or whatever, but like 10,000 people. That means 1,000 people spread out amongst the city would have to want that position. Out of 14,000 people, you can barely find 7 people that want to take the position. That's why almost all incumbents run unopposed. And every so often you get opposition, and it's usually like the whack job that everybody knows is a whack job, and no one wants to. Everyone just votes for the incumbent. That's it. You get like a handful of people. So you're not going to find a marginalized person because you typically don't find. And then once you do, all you're doing is reverse these terms. They keep saying reverse racism. I think they do, Parker. I believe they own their own homes. I don't know what. I guess I went on a rant. So, anyways, I don't know. Like all you're doing is what these terms people use, reverse discrimination or whatever, because that's what you're doing. That's what's happening. It's going in on the claim that all white people are racist and the white fragility and like white guilt and all this other stuff, and then they just come in and they say, hey, no, what we need to do is we need to eradicate white people from the upper echelon. Like, okay, so you take all 7 people and you kick them off, and then you put them with whatever you deem to be the marginalized community. But it's up to you. You deem you know what I mean? And it's usually somebody who thinks just like you, who looks just like you, and then they pass a bunch of policies that make themselves better. And then guess what? That's called discrimination. That's called racism. It's still called the same thing. Just because it goes by a different name or a different color or a different person, a different ideology, does not mean it's not discrimination. That's why I think discrimination is bullshit. Because it's just a tool people are wielding nowadays, like Ibram X. Kendi, that radical. Al Sharpton is the most racist person I've ever heard speak. Him and Jesse Jackson. The Reverend Jesse Jackson. It's the most, like, they're the most racist people. Just because they're not white doesn't make them not racist. Harry Belafonte was a horrible black supremacist. I loved his music. My grandmother got me into Jamaican Farewell. I loved the Harry Belafonte Calypso music. Do I agree with his politics? Would he not want to be in the same room with me because I'm white? Yes. Is that because white racism did that? Maybe. From some time far ago that is now gone? Almost all those people have far been deceased, and all that's left in its wake is black supremacists and marginalized communities that are racist against white people. Like that's really what this is about, and it's all about inclusion and blah blah blah. No, it's a changing of the guard. That's what this is. It's masquerading around. It's Marxism masquerading around as change for the better and the common good. You don't have a caste system in the United States anymore. You've got classes, and it's usually socioeconomic classes. You don't have what they've got in other countries. You've got race. That's what America has, that you can jump all over, is racism. And so that's how Marxism is making its way to turn everything that's capitalist into socialism. And socialism is the stepping stone for communism, which is the ultimate goal of Marxism. And I've been trying not to swear on the channel, but you can go fuck yourself if you think that people like me who are outspoken are going to let you turn my country into, from a beautiful capitalistic flower that produces, it's like that scene from Moana, you know, the like just the flowers and everything just growing up everywhere and being prosperous, and your evil just death and darkness to the flourish of society. You're just trying, like, it's masquerading as life and prosperity, but it's not. It is ultimately evil, and I recommend to every one of my listeners and anybody alike that they should actually go out there and listen to or read. It's a long read, so listen. It's over 100 hours. The Gulag Archipelagos, Volume 1, 2, and 3. You want to hear how socialism quickly turns to communism and turns into people spending tenors in concentration camps, essentially slave work camps for their communist overlords, all because they at one point were for a different side of the political aisle. This is our country. We're going to fight for it. That's why I don't like little committees like this. And these guys have no power, so I'm not too concerned. But no, essentially, and there's my big, deep rant. So, no. Anyways, the king of the castle complex, you're viewed as a threat. Hey, congratulations. You got it. You win. I'm going to drop off cookies. Like, you just won the prize. It's a cookie. It's a strong, and I said this earlier, it's a strong mayor form of government. That's what it is. Clash of the Titans, the witches of the fate, right? The oracles of fate. They cut the strings, right? In our form of government, like there's three essential houses of power at our level, and one of them is the Common Council, and two of them are cut by the mayor. So essentially, like the strings of fate, we have a strong mayor form of government, which gives the mayor a lot more power. And then you need to get 7 people behind what strings you're cutting on their end, which they still like a 60-40 mayor. So going on before this,
And
we're
there's
almost
no
done.
real progression taking place
not.
because of
Holy
how the system is already
smokes.
currently set up. And we're not making
doing
it a
Elvis,
priority.
right?
We're not
Sorry,
trying
guys.
to make progress as a city. That's
And
frustrating.
we're getting it done because we had to have this committee and that's what we're gonna do. So we're doing these things, but there's no follow through. And it's
Exactly.
kind of frustrating to me because, I mean, I'm not getting paid to do this. Nobody else on here is getting paid to do this.
None of us. The alderman got paid $3,500 a year, which is a drop in the bucket. That's 1/10 of a minimum wage job. I spent like 20 hours a week being an alderman. Works out to like $1.50 an hour or something like that when I worked it out. 20 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. Yeah, right, Parker. You're absolutely right. $3,500. Alderman Nate Smith from Ward 6 used to call it Christmas money. He said he'd work every year for Christmas money. That he didn't do it. You don't do it for the money. You've got to raise the bar so that like you give people a little more incentive. Because if you get rid of it entirely, you get it for free. And then the people that come out for free usually aren't upstanding citizens. They're usually like the typical wackos in town that are like, well, I'll go help the city for free. Oh, they're very altruistic, and they are like blind as hell. Right. You do it for one or two reasons, but you've got to make it worth somebody's time, and that's why we suggested, like, it hasn't been upgraded since the last charter change, which was um, uh, like 94. So with you added inflation, Alderman John Crawford put it together for us, and it was like it'd be like 11 grand. Or something like that, and we ended up just saying, let's just meet in the middle. Let's do like 7.5 or 8. It wasn't like it still wasn't anything like miraculous, like for the amount of bullshit you go through, people nailing you to a cross like weekly if you're me and you're outspoken. You do it because you actually want to make change. Feel it's important, right? No, that's definitely it. Or if you believe it is. There's a few aldermen that do it just for the power, right? Like, I didn't do it for the power. I did it because I wanted to stop people from doing crazy shit. Which I guess, as being a political commentator, that allows me to do it right here. There does have to be. So, okay, here's coming
our
up.
time. And yes, I did volunteer for this, but I volunteered for it to make a difference and a change for the city of Olean. And it's just frustrating. We do all this work and then where's the change?
There doesn't have to be change. That's one of the notes I wrote down. There does not have to be change. Sometimes, like, my position on the council was to stop you from making changes that were unnecessary and just nonsense. And that's the goal sometimes. There's some people that want to change the world, some people that want it to stay the same, and there's some people that jump back and forth. And I'll tell you, there's certain things that need change and there's certain things that don't. And if I don't agree with you, guess what? I'm going to be the brakes while you're the gas pedal. And those roles will swap. And that is the checks and balances of government, of freedom of speech. That's why it's there. That's why it exists. That's why all these things exist. And people need to get over themselves and think that, well, I volunteered my time and I want change. I put in this amount of work and I should have this amount of result. Like, no, that's not how it works. You don't get that amount of result because you put it in. What if you're wrong? Like, what if you just say, hey, I want murder to be legal, and like you're one person? Well, I put in a lot of time. Who gives a shit? You don't. Sorry, odd man out. Get out of here. Murder lover, like that's what happens. And excuse me. I just want change.
Using.
But that
is it
they need to
even
go.
legal? But
So-
are these forms even legal today?
Well,
Well, and
right.
they're outdated because nobody's ever actually used them because they stop it before it ever gets to.
That could be true. That sounds like a Hollywood scenario, but the problem is that life isn't Hollywood. Life isn't Hollywood. Life is usually like more dull than that. And the reason that, like, okay, so there's an archaic form that nobody uses. Not even the people that when you go to them, there's a problem, they have a verbal conversation, and then they go through what seems to be the right fit, not based on this archaic policy that nobody knew existed up until you guys started digging and found some old policy that nobody uses with some board that nobody has to put together, and then they found some form that goes along with it, and they're like, oh, this must be what they use. Like, no, they don't even have the form printed. Actually, they didn't print them until you asked for them, and a lot of times things don't, like, there's no complaints being brought forward because there's not a problem. Like, that's actually 90% of the world. Like, it just, like, you can't just go into some place and be like, there's unicorns running rampant throughout the city. No, there's not. No, there isn't. No, they don't have a mechanism in place to stop unicorns from running through the city halls. Like, how do we stop that? How do we stop the unicorns from running through City Hall if we don't have a policy for stopping unicorn stampedes? Because there's no such thing as unicorn. And that's not the point. The point is to make sure that we have a policy in case unicorns become corporeal and run through City Hall. Stampede. What if they kill somebody? Those deaths are on you. Sorry, I didn't make you put you on your phone. Turn it down because you're watching me at work or something. But no, that's the same thing because a lot of these things, they're not like unicorns where these things can exist, unlike unicorns. But they're very rare. They don't happen. people think that they happen on a weekly basis, like, and they probably happen on like not a centennial basis, but a decadent, a decadent basis. It's decade. That's the word we're going for. Okay, so let's listen to more of them piss Kevin off.
That
So
point.
when you're reading through these forms, you guys are using
Heck a
words
lot.
like complaint as if they don't. You're just a complaint. Name of the complaint, not person who had a complaint, person who was sexually harassed, person, whatever. You're using the word complaint. Complaint sounds like you're on trial
Because complaint is a word.
already.
Complaint is a word. You have emotional attachment to complaint. You don't like the word.
Verbiage in the
I keep
forms
pummeling through
itself
because I don't want to be here for 6 hours going over nonsense.
Is
Oh, we're getting close. We're like 30
Where
seconds
was
away.
Oh,
why
but
would
Dan,
I want Gary? Because he sexually harassed me, and Gary doesn't get fired, but they find him guilty of sexually harassing me, but he doesn't get fired.
Oh, there's a part on the form.
What's that say to me? You asked me what I wanted done. Why would you even ask that question? Why
but
would I have?
Daniel, there have been times that I've done investigations and I'll ask the person what they would like to see as the outcome, because that helps me gauge
what they
how,
want done.
where
Right.
this person is at.
And I got to
Because
quote
I
Ben
might
Shapiro here
think
because
that,
guess what? Truth don't care about
Bill
your
called
feelings.
Sally a B and, she'd like him to be fired. But in reality,
If I'm assuming the B stands for bitch, and if Joe calls Sally a B, who cares? They had an argument at work. An argument is not workplace violence. An argument is not sexual harassment. So it's all about their feelings. We don't care about people's feelings. We're here to do a job. You're at your employer to do your job. If you don't like your job, you quit. If somebody attacks you at work, that is a crime. That's workplace violence. That's some other, like, what are you going to charge them with 2 different charges? That's called double jeopardy. If it's workplace violence, it's because somebody was violent with you at work. You call the police. You get the police department involved. Like, if somebody has an argument at work and you call it workplace violence, you're arguing from an emotional standpoint, and emotion has no place in a place that is supposed to be rational and reasonable, that follows a reasonable and rational legal system that is not based on an emotional standpoint. Fuck your feelings. There's my Ben Shapiro for the evening. We're going to jump ahead a minute here. But what if he calls her a B?
HR's office and he's
would not do it this way, but.
Oh, I agree completely.
And I would even go as far as to, I mean, this is just my opinion, but to meet with that person away from the workplace.
Right.
I think the last thing you need is the people, and you know how people talk, especially in the city building. If they see Bob Smith walk into the HR's office and he's in there.
The HR director is also handling other things like, forms that they need to change their whatever for, like, it might not be the healthcare that they're dealing with, but maybe they have to fill out some, hey, I took that sexual harassment training. Here's my thing. Oh, Bob's in here. God damn it, fruit flies. I opened one beer and they all just come around. I haven't had one in here. I had a housefly last week. Anyways, so we're getting off on a tangent. Yeah, there should be something to verify. Am I on the right? Yeah, I must have missed it. Anyways, you're going off premises
for a half hour or so. They know he's complaining or there's a problem. So I think you have to make it more private than that. And that would be my opinion, is to meet with this person off the premises, whether they work at the.
Where you don't have any liability, like you don't have any business being, unless it's for city business. Like, I'm taking them to lunch. I was just going to go to the diner down the road, guys, and talk about how Sally called Bob a B back, and Bob went bananas and had to file a sexual harassment complaint because he thought she was calling him a female dog, and well, sometimes female dogs have litters. He didn't want to have any puppies.
Sewer plant, the
Oh.
DPW garage, or the city building.
And then
I think we
who's to
scratched the
say, who's to say that if, so say I was in this situation, I would refuse to fill this piece of paper out because who's to say this information isn't going to be shared? Let's
Right.
face it.
You're accusing somebody of a crime. Sexual harassment is a crime and get somebody fired. Workplace violence is a crime and can get somebody fired and put in jail. If you're accusing somebody of a crime, I believe they have, the Bill of Rights talks about that. It gives you something that allows you to confront your accuser. And you have to fill out, like, there's got to be some sort of verification. Whether you guys want this form or not, they have to have something in writing. Not just the verification from the HR director that somebody has put forth a formal complaint. You can't just sit there and be like, well, Judy filed a complaint to the HR director verbally, and then the HR director wrote down, like, notarized a form saying so. Okay, like, no, Judy's signature needs to be on a form that says that she's coming forward with this formal complaint. Once it's a formal complaint, all parties involved, like, you're talking about, like, submitting crimes to your employer that are being accused by, or that you're accusing somebody else of committing. Like, if I were to go to the police station and say, so-and-so sexually harassed me, so-and-so is harassing me, so-and-so threatened violence upon me, which would be assault. Battery is the actual act of committing those acts of violence. Assault is the threatening or menacing thereof. Anyways, if I go to the police department and I file a complaint, I have to file and swear to a form, and then that is public record. I don't care about the emotional state of Judy or Sally being called a B. If you in good conscience know that this is a crime and you're coming forward to accuse somebody of doing it in an attempt to now justice sought, not just ruin somebody's life from an emotional standpoint. I'm emotionally charged and I'm gonna ruin your life. Guess what? That is public information. I'm not gonna share this. Well, you're the one accusing somebody of a crime. Would you like to back out of the form? And maybe that's where it comes from. You people are nuts. Nowhere does it say that that is supposed to be kept private. Maybe as they're doing an initial investigation, they keep it private. But you will fill out that form, and who gives a shit if somebody sees it? If somebody else is breaking protocol, and their protocols are to share it amongst that's called collusion. That's called conspiracy. Those are also crimes. So if those things are going on, it will quickly be found out. And if you have the wherewithal, you'll bring that forward. And then you must prove that. But you can't. It's public information. If you accuse somebody of a crime, then don't accuse anybody of a crime, because it's all in your head if you don't want to go to jail for falsely stating that somebody's committing a crime.
I say scratch the form. I don't think there should be a form.
Okay, so coming up on this one.
Oh, well, I mean, it shouldn't, but
a whole separate file. She has no place near somebody's personnel file.
Yep,
just a question, because there's like I said, there's so many things that are outdated that people have just passed on because, well, that's the way we do it. That's the mentality in the city building. Even when we bring in new employees, they get indoctrinated into that thinking. And it's very hard to break that.
That's a problem.
Linda was mayor. I would like to point this out. Linda was mayor for 4 years prior to Bill becoming mayor. Where was this anti-indoctrination witch hunt when Linda was mayor? There wasn't. Status quo, guys. This is politicians being politicians.
That's a huge problem.
See,
you didn't do anything about it, Linda.
The part about filing and what happens to the complaint.
So even up onto the 51 number.
Department head
in charge of.
That's all HR.
Yep.
I mean, that's how it works.
that has been my problem for 10 years with the city. They take the HR and they've done this for years. They've just divvied it up
Because it didn't
amongst the
exist
department
way
heads,
back
like,
when, and you didn't have the
LU
wherewithal
Tech
10
was
years
the
ago when you were
safety
mayor to
That's
do
why
anything
we're
about it
requesting
either.
This
Well,
person,
and I don't
Right.
want to
Well,
be
I'm gonna call a spade a spade. That's Bill Aleo trying to control.
It was Linda Witt. It was everybody else. It isn't control, right? Because you've already given him control. You've given Linda control. You gave everybody control when you were on when you guys signed up for the charter. Maybe you didn't live here when the charter was signed, but guess what? It exists. So if you want that change, you change the charter. This isn't a power struggle. This is just how it is. You want to change that, you change the charter. You don't go after the current mayor who is enjoying using the powers afforded to him to rule over a city. That's why you elect these officials, to rule over you, to represent you. If they don't represent you by the way that they make decisions, then you don't vote them back in. That's it. If they don't make changes that you want changed, if they don't stop changes that you don't want changed, that's calling a spade a spade. It's always been this way. What did you do? Hold on, it's coming right up.
Oh, Lord, Charlie.
oh, it's been going
That's
on long
exactly what
before
it is.
Bill.
It has. See, there you go.
It's
Linda Witt.
Well, but he perpetuates that because all of this stuff, I'm just appalled at the
Mhm.
level of control between the mayor and the supervisors. It must be
Yep.
very stressful to work there.
No, not at all. Nope. Very peaceful. Sorry.
I think it is. And I
But
think
yes.
some people
You
just
work
get
there!
used to
Ugh.
knowing where they can push the buttons and where they can't. And some people, it's like they just go to work and go home.
That should,
And
there
it
probably
shouldn't
aren't
be
even
that
any,
way.
y'all probably don't even have any complaints though, do you? There probably aren't even any active complaints.
No.
Everybody's scared us all to complain.
Nope.
Who they complaining to?
Because we're not full of violent
But you don't know who's
toxic
going to hear it.
masculinity.
That's
Well, you don't
very
even
true.
know.
It is.
You don't even know who's going to handle it.
Mhm.
So
So yeah,
John referenced
No, we know who's going to handle it.
the accounting guy who's our sexual harassment guy, right?
Fred.
Most likely to sexual harass.
Fred. I'm gonna leave Fred alone. Well, no, I'm not. But would it make sense to have Fred come on here and try to explain to us
How
what
he
part of
handles it?
this
Fred
what
doesn't know how to
part
do
of this
the
policy
bookkeeping.
he does,
He's
and what
the
he
bookkeeper.
does
Like,
with any type of sexual harassment claim he may have?
Has he had any training to do it?
I think you got to I think we got to understand what his responsibility
Or what
is
he thinks
before
his
we can even
responsibilities
ask him
are.
if he has any training.
Mhm.
I mean, does he?
I've butted heads with Fred and argued my entire being on the council. I've called him out in meetings. I've probably beat up more on him than I did on Linda Witt, which is kind of, I mean, she's an easy target too. I mean, just because it's all redundancy, but his just inability. So to make him I call it the sexual harassment coordinator. I mean, probably wrote that on his yearbook. Most likely to be a sexual harassment coordinator, coordinating the sexual harassment across the nation. So anyways.
That he's the sexual harassment guy.
I'm pretty sure he knows. So now we're going to skip about 10 minutes. Yeah, you saw the mayor's secretary pop in. Are they done yet? Looney Tunes. Okay. 3.5 minutes.
I'll get a hold of the handbook. And then our storm is here and it's after 7:30. So how about, I'll ask these questions. I'll get a hold of the handbook and then we
That's
will
what-
meet again in 2
We
weeks.
skipped here. The storm's going.
Okay.
And
Sounds
Murder, She
good?
Wrote is on.
And
then
don't
we'll
want to get
send
beat
out-
up, he got to show up.
That's right. I've gotten beat up a lot. So I will, let me talk with John because he's good at that.
4.5.
Because
An hour and 4.
I don't
Yeah.
want to. I don't
Uh-oh,
want
I'm
to
lagging out, guys.
Our explanation. You can
Right.
just write them down.
I agree.
Hold on. Did I freeze you again? There. Sound is fine. Yeah, I reset the video every so often. Is buffering.
I don't put
Okay,
their
guys.
stuff in writing.
All right.
Yeah, so let's send something to the mayor, is what she said, and then let's send something to the mayor, and he doesn't want to put that in writing. Which is probably true. They don't. Nobody wants to. You set up a guillotine and you send it to somebody and say, "Hey, put your head in it, test it out for me." Like, I'm not doing that either. Screw you, folks. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. This barrel of monkey laughs. Barrel of laughs. Just shenanigans and monkey shines, right? Just I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, folks. Like, this is what's happening at your city government. This is what's happening at your local government. They're being influenced by committees like this. Which, luckily, there's people in there, like, putting the brakes on by just breaking it down, tearing it apart. If it doesn't make sense, they don't vote for it. Hopefully. You think. Uh-oh. Did I lag out again? Okay, so anyway, folks, we're off to see the wizard. I'll have hopefully another one for you tomorrow. It'll probably be a little earlier in the day. But yeah, this was my first rendering of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee by City Olean, and but I think we should be. I think we should be fine. We'll weather the storm, folks. Jesus, lots of messages over here. So, all right, gang. I'm gonna go grab myself another brewski. Put some chickens to bed. I'm gonna do a little work on the RV, and then I'm going to bed. Waking up, going to work, and get you guys that next podcast after work tomorrow. So, we will catch you guys on the next time. I know I'm belaboring the point now. We'll catch you on the next one. Stay tuned. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and whatever else that people think that they should do. Oh, and your hate mail. I love your hate mail. Love it. Love it. Love it. Read it to my kids before I go to bed. Before they go to bed. Puts them to bed. Sound as a pound, because they know their dad's changing the world for the better. So, bye. Sometimes putting the brakes on and sometimes continuing forward. So like, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on a flippy flop.